Okay. Last video, I swear. But this is part 8 of why slavery is a bunch of bullshit. We are indigenous to this land. We gotta stop calling ourselves black. We can keep black as a culture, but we can no longer identify racially. Anybody who identifies with white is agreeing to racism and being racist. Let's get into it. So I ended off with Rosewood. Go watch the last video because I ended with Rosewood, but I could not finish it because it takes too much. So the Rosewood Massacre of 1923, I think that's where we at. Rosewood Massacre 1923. Now the other video shows what it was before that to better help you understand how we get to where we get to. So the Rosewood Massacre started by a white woman saying somebody did something to her, which was not true. Somebody did, but she knew who it was. She lied and said a black man had assaulted her, and this sent a small mob of white men on a rampage. Now, if you've been keeping up with the story, you would see that almost all of them start like that coincidentally, and they always just so happen to be in the most thriving black communities. Interesting, right? Now, this is all going to prove that we've been on this land, that this has been the same strategy they've been using since, 1492. They haven't switched it up at all. All they did was stop fighting physically in that sense, like in a war, because they were losing. So they ended up going to this blacksmith, a young boy named Sam, I forget his last name, Sam Carter, I believe. They ended up going to him and lynching him. So this is what cracks everything off. They lynched this young boy on this hunt for this imaginary person. Now, mind you, if you go back to the other video again, I named the rich families. So it just so happened that they ended up going to Sylvester Carrier's house, who was a part of that wealthy family who started the community. They ended up going there, like, you harboring that guy. So this was like a safe haven for the kids and stuff and the people in the community once they found out they lynched the boy and that they was coming looking. So they go to all the children and the women are and these wealthy people, and they're basically like, give them up, whatever. Now this turns into a shootout. So everybody on the inside starts shooting, everybody on the outside starts shooting. But here's another thing, like what I say, they know they at war. We the only ones acting like we not. So they were unprepared on the inside. Every white community around got together to come help. That's the thing I will say about white people. They don't have to agree on shit. They don't even have to like each other. They don't even have to know each other. They just heard it's time to gun some niggas down. Here I come. We need to get more organized. We need to be more collective. We need to stand like that and ride like that. Because just imagine if there's only like 2 or 3 men in this house having a shoot off with 50 to 100 men and like not losing. Imagine the history. Imagine the outcome of the history if we had the same numbers as them. Let me continue though. So yeah, this turned into about like a 7-day standoff, which forced black people flee into the woods. These white mobsters killed cattle, they killed animals, they burned churches, schools, homes, everything down, pushed the black people out. They had to flee to the swamps. Who else did that? Come on, you've been following. Who else did that? The indigenous been doing that since 1492. They went to the swamps where they knew they would be safe to get away. So the standoff was going on for a couple of days, and in the end, there was nothing left of Rosewood. They completely annihilated and destroyed that place. These animals. All right, let's move on to another place because y'all, I be getting irritated the longer I have to talk about it, but I ain't gonna break. I'm gonna get the info out because each one teach one. A black proverb. We got to do more of that. So, Catcher Massacre of 1923, later 1923. So, basically what happened, same thing. A white woman got assaulted and killed. They ended up arresting 3 young black men in relation to this assault and murder, which they knew the whole time that it wasn't them. So, yeah, always. Okay. This lady says, or not, she didn't say because she was dead. She didn't say nothing. They arrested 3 young black men for this murder and this assault, even though they knew that it was not them at all. Again, it's always interesting that it's these thriving black communities. So either poor people don't commit crimes, none of us were poor, or this was wages of war. And this was strategic attacks from the government. But let me continue. So a mob came of about 500. The mobs were always like 300 to 500 also. 500 white men came. They demanded to take them from the jail, but they wouldn't let them. Now, if you go through the other videos, you will see how common that was. They would often arrest them to make sure that they were unarmed and vulnerable so that they could get lynched and abused and assaulted, because just like the Rosewood one, all we needed was a gun, and it was going to be a 7-day standoff, okay? But, yeah, they put them in the jail. When the mob came to get them, they was like, nah, they're going to get trial. We're trying to switch things up. After that, the white men were so mad. Now, this is where this story always stood out to me, is because of what they did afterwards. I was like, But when I read more into it, I understood why. So these sick motherfuckers went to the graveyard, the black graveyard, and they destroyed all the headstones, all the tombstones, and dug up the bodies. So you know they had time. They dug up the bodies and burned them all. They destroyed the entire cemetery. Now, at first, I just thought it was straight up sick, which it is, but it shit is spiritual too. I'm trying not to get too deep into it because I don't want to lose y'all. But outside of it being spiritual, this was because, if you're paying attention, they wanted to make sure that the history is erased. So if you destroy burn down all of the documents and the places that held the facts and the histories, and then they destroy the cemeteries, And the bodies, now you cannot prove who was here. You cannot see, because you got to remember, y'all, newspapers got obituaries and things like that. In fact, cemeteries have what? They got headstones. They got what? Your date of birth and when you died. Now think, if they were trying to convince us that we have been slaves for 400 years, it wouldn't make any sense to have a dead body that maybe, say, I don't know, before slavery, 1609, 1728. They had to destroy the evidence, y'all. So yeah, after that, they went on their usual purge, raping, killing, and stealing throughout the land, forcing the people to flee to the rivers. What do we do? What are we doing in some of the wars? What was the Maroons doing? Running to the water for safety. So yeah, the black residents ended up fleeing. A lot of them were forced to give up their stuff, like sign over things, forced to give up their land, businesses, homes, things like that. Same story, different place. I'm not sure of the amount of deaths, but I do know 300 people were forced to leave and give up their stuff, about 60 families. And then here we go again with the kicker. This then immediately turned into a what? A sundown town. What did I tell you? Where there is a sundown town, it is not racism there. It's not racist, y'all. Race is not a thing. It doesn't exist. They only created it to hold us back. We're behind because we're fighting a racial fight, and that shit ain't it. They made it a sundown town immediately after, because sundown towns help them prevent the descendants and the people of that land from coming back and taking it from them. Sundown towns were created to keep them safe, not due to hatred, due to fear. So where there's a sundown town, there was a black thriving community. Mark my words. Now, unfortunately, the 3 black men were found guilty. 2 of them were sentenced to the death penalty, and the other one was sentenced to life, where he then ended up dying in prison in 1928, I believe. This is another reason, like, it's cases like all of these that I just named that make it so hard for me to ever agree with the death penalty. I don't really like the prison system, only because of the history of this. We know most or a lot of black people are in jail for things we never did. And then they do the death penalty, not because of like, oh, you deserve to die, to shut you up, to silence you. You can't talk if you're not alive. So I'll never be pro death penalty because of the ancestors. I just can't do it. So hopefully you see by now that this isn't really about race, y'all. They only created race as a distraction, really. So go back to my other video where I say what race was created, because the poor whites, indentured servants, started working with the black indentured servants, or slaves as they prefer to call us and not them, which matters, right? They cannot legally really call white people slaves, because what the word means, y'all. We have to disassociate from this word. I'm telling you, we cannot be black anymore. But I hope by now you see that it isn't about race. Race is a distraction. This way, we're fighting for racial equality, which is literally impossible because of the meaning of the words. Are y'all following me yet? Like, are y'all getting what this was all about? When you call yourselves black, when you identify as black as your race, you are saying, I am a slave. I am inferior. That's literally all it meant. If you say you are white, you are saying I am better than a black. That is all that it meant. I am not a slave. Whites could not be enslaved. The only reason they created race was to create race-based slavery. Is it clicking? So yeah, that really concludes this little mini series. But I'm gonna post the videos about reclassification because that goes into it. But I just want you to see that they don't just make a law randomly. It don't just be 5 years. They think like 100 years ahead. They plan about 100 years in advance. So in 1824, they start planning for 1924. So in 1824, they said, this is what we've got to do so that by 1924, it'll be easier to reclassify. That's why they were burning the cemeteries. That's why they were burning the newspaper stands. That's why they were messing up the headstones. That's why they were stealing all the lands. That's why they created sundown towns. This all had to do with reclassifying the indigenous into Negroes. That's what it was all about. Because before the Civil War, they was getting their asses whooped. So they was like, we got to make these motherfuckers think that this ain't their land, because we were showing them that we would not stop fighting. We showed them that if y'all want a 500-year war, we would fight all 500 years. So they were like, we're going to have to twist some history. We're going to have to lie. And we're going to have to displace them. And we're going to have to reclassify them. That's the only way. And that's why we're the only people who are constantly getting renamed. We went from, Negro, colored, what came first? I think black came first and then African American, because a lot of people don't know we haven't even been African American that long. Why people are clinging on to the idea. I remember my grandparents being like, when Roots came out, they were like, hell, I didn't know we was African. That was like, who's that? Was it Jesse Jackson, one of them in the 60s, who started pushing that Pan-African idea? It's all a part of the plan. So while a lot of black people are being like, we are African and fight for it, you have to do your research and understand why a lot of us are like, I'm not okay with that. First of all, I'm not okay with anybody renaming me. I don't give a fuck if I was from Africa. You don't tell me who I am. I'll tell you who the fuck I am. So yeah, I'm going to get all into the reclassification. I just want y'all to understand the process that led up to it. I want you to see that this is war, that they just renamed everything so that we would stop fighting. See y'all next time.